Good evening, everyone. You've got it, yeah? Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Planning Committee. But before we start the meeting, I have a few housekeeping announcements to make. There's no planned fire alarm test today, and if you hear the fire alarm, please leave by the nearest fire exit and make your way to the agreed assembly point, which is the St John's Churchyard off Jewett Street. Council security staff will be available to direct you as required. This meeting is being live streamed and will be available on the Council's YouTube channel after the end of the live stream. If you do not want to be captured in the live stream, please sit in the rear 2 rows of the meeting hall. The public toilets are located off the main reception area as you came in. And finally, please switch your mobile phone to silence whilst in the meeting room. Members of the public are welcome to film, audio record, photograph or tweet the public proceedings of the meeting. I'd ask you please to be considerate towards other people in the room and take care not to disturb the proceedings. If you are filming the meeting, please do not film the audience. The code for access to the Council's Wi-Fi is visible on the screen behind me, and I won't look, but I believe it is. There you are. Thank you. During the meeting, members of the committee will not access the internet, except as it relates to official business of the meeting, send or receive emails, text message, or tweet concerning the business of the committee. I shall now begin. First item is item 1, apologies. And only apologies, of course, is Councillor Morris, who's ably replaced by Councillor Salmon. There you are. That was recorded, wasn't it? Oh my gosh. Okay. Item 2, confirmation of voting members. Please, would members indicate those who are voting members, please?
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Item 3, notification of any items of business which the Chair deems urgent, and the following additional documents have been circulated before the meeting. The addendum report and the members' pack. Can you confirm you've all received copies of those documents? Thank you very much. I now move on to item 4, disclosure of interest and dispensation. Does any member wish to declare any interest or dispensation in respect of any item of issue to be considered at this meeting? Very good. I now move on to item 5, which is the development management. The next item of business concerns the determination of planning applications. I'd like to remind everyone of the committee's guidance and conduct of business. Officers will present the report, outline their recommendations, and answer questions raised by the committee. If present wishing to speak, the following may then address the committee for no more than 3 minutes each. A spokesperson representing any objector to the application. By now, please, you need to identify a single spokesperson. If more than one objector wishes to speak, the time will be allocated, divided accordingly within the 3-minute time slot. Followed by the applicant or the agent, followed by a spokesperson representing any supporter of the applications who live within 100 metres of the development site. And last but not least, of course, the ward councillor representing area affected by the application. Each speaker should restrict their comments to the planning aspects of the proposal and should avoid repeating information which is already in the report. The meeting is not a hearing where participants present evidence to be cross-examined by other participants. At the end of each representation, the committee may ask questions of the presenter. Speakers should really lead the committee on the subject which they would welcome further questioning. After receiving all submissions, the committee will debate the application and consider the recommendations. This is a council meeting which is open to the public, and there should be no interruptions, please. Finally, I'd like everyone present to know that although the Planning Committee comprises members of different political parties, we are not whipped, either physically or otherwise in them. Our decisions are made in accordance with the Council's planning policy and based on the information contained in the relevant report, together with the consultation responses on any verbal submissions made today. How we approach these applications are set out in the Development Management Report in item 5. Are members content and happy to note the report? Thank you very much. In that case, I now proceed to go on to 5.1, which is 135 Park Street, London, SE1 9EA and 4 to 8 Emerson Street, London SE1. And this is called, members, pages 5 to 113 of the agenda pack and pages 1 to 4 of the addendum report. Can I ask the officer who will be presenting to introduce himself, and you may begin.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Chair, Committee and members of the public. My name is Patrick Cronin, Senior Planning Officer here at Southwark Council. Planning application 19/AP/0240 proposes the development of land and buildings forming the northeastern corner of an urban block bounded by Emerson Street and Park Street in the Bankside area of the borough. The site is within the Central Activity Zone and an Opportunity Area. Although it is not within a conservation area, the site is within 25 metres of Bear Gardens Conservation Area, 3 listed buildings, and a number of scheduled ancient monuments. The site lies within the Borough Bermondsey and Rivers Archaeological Priority Zone and is of the highest importance for archaeological interest. A number of tall buildings have been granted planning permission in the vicinity in recent years, as a result of which the area is taking on a denser and more tightly knit character befitting of its central London location. Planning permission was granted in 2005 to replace the existing buildings on the site with an 8-storey office development. This permission has been technically implemented, as confirmed by the Council in 2011, and as such could be built out. The applicant proposes to redevelop the site to provide a 12-storey building with 1 further storey of accommodation at basement level and rooftop plant. The first 9 above-ground storeys would all have a broadly similar floor area and rectangular shape. The uppermost 3 storeys, floors 10, 11 and 12, which would have a wavy plan form and glazed elevations, would be set back from the Park Street and Emerson Street frontages and benefit from access to outdoor terrace areas. We have the model here, which is important for appreciating the building in its context. The scheme would provide a significant uplift in office floor space and introduce a new flexible cafe retail unit at ground floor level. Widened footways and new publicly accessible realm would also be delivered, together with off-street servicing and disabled parking. The proposal would also incorporate affordable workspace. As explained in the addendum, at the time the committee report was published in late December, the applicant was offering 685 square metres of affordable workspace in a self-contained unit at basement and ground floor level. The applicant has since improved their offer and is now proposing to provide a further 685 square metres at first floor level. In total, therefore, 1,370 square metres of affordable workspace would be delivered. This quantum of floor space represents 10% of the uplift on the existing buildings. In terms of the internal layout, the basement would accommodate the lowest storey of the self-contained affordable workspace, as well as plant and cycle storage. The ground floor would accommodate the reception foyer for the main office, a 145 square metre retail cafe unit, a loading bay, and the upper floor of the self-contained affordable workspace unit. The 11 upper floors would be given over to open plan office accommodation. All floors would be linked by a central lift core and stairwell. Comments were received from 9 different members of the public about the application. 8 of these comments were in objection and 1 was in support. The material planning considerations repeatedly raised were: 1, the overall scale and height of the building; 2, the failure to retain and incorporate the existing warehouse facade into the design of the new building; 3, loss of privacy and daylight sunlight for neighbouring residential properties; and 4, the cumulative environmental and transport impacts that this development will cause if constructed concurrently with the other consented proposals nearby. You will also be aware of Ward Member Councillor Noakes' email sent earlier this afternoon, in which he apologises for being unable to attend this evening and highlights matters of concern. He asks members to satisfy themselves on the 3 following points. 1, daylight and sunlight impacts on the properties to the north of the site; 2, the height of the proposed development; and 3, the loss of the historic warehouse facade and the impact of this loss on the nearby Bear Gardens conservation area. As expanded on in the main body of the report, specifically paragraphs 143 to 144, the loss of the warehouse facade is necessary to optimise the quality and quantum of office space on this site. Furthermore, the loss of the warehouse building has been previously accepted as part of the extant planning permission. The replacement building is considered to be of a high quality design with a scale and height appropriate to its surroundings, allowing it to sit unobtrusively within the London and Borough views. As such, and considering the various other benefits that would flow from the development, the limited harm caused by the loss of the warehouse is justified. The proposal would result in adverse daylight and sunlight impacts to a number of nearby residential windows. In many cases, however, the affected rooms benefit from daylight and sunlight through other windows or are not principal living spaces. Moreover, the losses are not significantly worse than those incurred by the extant scheme, and the retained levels in this context are adequate. The main body of the report, specifically paragraphs 101 to 139, sets out in detail the degree of impact and the mitigating factors. In respect of overlooking, the report sets out why the separation distances between the development and the surrounding dwellings are considered adequate. It also explains that, through conditions to control hours of use of outdoor spaces, the surrounding occupiers' privacy would not be harmed. The concerns raised by local residents about the cumulative transport, pollution and disruption impacts resulting from numerous sites being developed in this location simultaneously are recognised. In response, conditions and legal obligations have been agreed with the developer to mitigate such impacts. Mechanisms through which this will be achieved include a construction logistics plan, a construction environmental management plan, a travel plan, a delivery and service management plan, and the formation of a working group between the developer of this site and the developer of the two nearby sites. In conclusion, the proposal would make efficient use of the land to deliver a high quality and sustainable office development that accords with the development plan in terms of increasing employment in the borough. The major increase in the affordable workspace component, which would secure 10% of the uplift over the existing buildings at reduced rates for 30 years, is a significant improvement to the proposal. Additional economic benefits will be brought by the increased provision of high-quality office space and the creation of new jobs during and post-construction. A range of financial contributions will also be secured to offset the impacts of the development and assist with local and London-wide infrastructure investment. It is therefore recommended that members grant permission for 19/AP/0240, subject to the conditions set out in the attached draft decision notice, referral to the Mayor of London, and the timely resolution of a Section 106 agreement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, can I ask Councillor Whittam?
I'd like to ask about the archaeological conditions and explorations. If something absolutely fantastic was found underneath the building that's there, would this are there sufficient provisions within the recommendation to protect those?
You'll respond, Michael.
Thank you, Chair. The archaeological conditions set out are typical for our development of this sort in this location. It is a location that's highly significant in terms of archaeology. A lot of extraordinary finds have been found in this area. The condition allows for the site to be evaluated once the building has been demolished and so on, and then a program of archaeological mitigation works if something of normal significance is found, but if there is something of extraordinary significance, another theatre, another Shakespearean theatre, or anything of that ilk, it would then have to be fully explored and then preserved on the site. So that would be the impact on that. However, I mean, I have to say that it has been assessed and understood carefully with at pre-application stage and at application stage, and this is a sort of the condition would only be placed on there if we are satisfied that on the balance of probabilities it is unlikely that we will find something of the greatest significance in this location. That's how it's been understood, and that's how it's been conditioned.
So if there was something absolutely mesmerising, we'd have to act quickly to stop it being bulldozed away.
Well, no, the archaeological work would, yes, you mean the actual archaeology can't be bulldozed away. With this program of once the building's demolished and then the archaeological work is carried out, then whatever is found there will be considered carefully, and then a decision taken on what if it is disturbing significant archaeological remains, then a proposal will be prepared for how that will be preserved on the site, because our policy is to preserve the highest order of significance of archaeology on the site.
One last question. If the works that are going on to the basement disturb the Rose Theatre, which is a possibility of the water being drained out of that by a lower water table on this site, whose responsibility would that be to put that right?
As far as I'm aware, the Rose Theatre basement is a sort of self-contained feature. The water that you see there is a sort of is a seal on the archaeology that's actually under a sort of a sand bed, and it's completely enclosed by the foundations of the Rose Court, the building that is on top of that. We don't expect that that will cause that degree of impact across the road and further down Park Street on this location. The Rose Theatre itself is monitored it has sort of automatic monitoring systems, and is monitored by Historic England. So we would have an immediate call from Historic England and the ancient scheduled monument inspector to immediately come, who would immediately sort of notify us that there is something going on and that there's been a disturbance. So in many respects, that is the most highly monitored piece of archaeology in the borough. So if there's any disturbance of that, we would be notified straight away.
Before going to you, Councillor Rose, just ask a question, just for clarity's sake. What is considered to be significant find? What would you give examples of what might be significant?
Well, significant finds of the highest order of significance is where something would become a scheduled monument, designated a scheduled monument. We have very few scheduled monuments in the borough. Chair of the King Edward III's Manor House in Rotherhithe. We have the Rose Theatre. We have the boat in the basement of Guy's Hospital. There's a number of them, but they are of the highest order of significance, and they are so evident structures that pertain to the history of the borough in a highly significant way. So, beyond that, if we don't expect that there is something of that significance in this location, but we would we have an archaeological advisor who we have an archaeologist in the borough who would be monitoring these works and determines what is of the highest significance and should be reported to Historic England in that respect.
There was, just to remind councillors, an example a few years ago at Brandon House, just opposite Borough High Street, where there were plans to build an underground car park, and it was discovered that there was I think the remains of a Tudor palace where the car park was going to be built. So as a result, construction was delayed, and the Tudor remains were protected. So that's an example of it worked. Obviously, not as high level as some of the ones that Michael's mentioned, but it was a significant find, and that was protected.
Thank you. Councillor Rose.
Yeah, can I take you to page 13 of the agenda pack and the graphic that we've been sent? And I just want a clarification how that image ties in with condition 28, hours of use, roof terraces and corner balconies. My question in relation to this, can you see it? Page 13 of the supplementary pack, you know, the image where we get a close-up. This one. Yeah. First question is the sort of like the preservation and protection of that open space in the planning context, in essence, that if consented to, the applicant might build out into those corners and you'll get a net gain of office floor space, so the proportion of affordable workspace as a percentage actually decreases potentially. And secondly, I understand that the condition applies to on the corner balconies level 2 to level 8, but I'm just conscious that level 2, which I think is what it looks like the first floor when you look at the graphic, and its proximity still to the residential building on Park Street, and whether there might be some discussion around about looking at that or being flexible, but maybe that's a question for the applicant. So from a design point of view, are those corners protected in terms of the build out, and what can we do to ensure that there isn't encroachment of it being enclosed, and the restrictions on, if you like, use of those balconies for social activities seems to be contained in the condition, but obviously if they were to introduce licensable activity, especially in the upper sort of levels, that will be a matter that will be dealt with separately through licensing.
Yes, thank you. Sorry. So in terms of your concern that possibly at a later time an amendment might come forward proposing to infill those balconies, we've worked at great length with the applicant for the past few years to refine the design of this proposal, and critical to the design of the proposal is this chamfered corner and the relief it provides. The scheme you see before you, obviously you have to make a decision on it in its current format, and any change whereby the building envelope would enlarge and essentially replace these corner balconies with development instead would be a materially different scheme, which we would then need to receive as an entirely new planning application, which may then come back before you as members of the committee. It is the scheme you see before you is for a proposal with chamfered balconies, and like I say, we have worked quite hard with the applicant to achieve this, and they're very happy with the response. So obviously I would never say never, but at this point in time, this is a proposal that you see before you. And these balconies are an important part of the scheme. We consider them to be important, so we would be resistant to any change of that kind at a later time. In terms of the hours of use, that, as you refer to condition 28, all of the balconies, so that's level 2 to level 8, because you'll note the ground floor level, it's actually 2 stories, so you've got ground and first floor. So level 2 to level 8 all those corner balconies would be restricted to between 8 a.m. and 10 p.m., which is exactly the same hours as the rooftop terraces.
So, but in the graphic level 2, is that it starts there, or does it start at the one above?
So you've got ground and level 1
Yeah.
at, sorry, actually, yeah, let me just provide it here. So, oops,
Yeah, you might want to show on
I think it's a little bit further. So as this image shows, you've got a cantilevering balcony, above which is level 2. And immediately beneath that cantilevering balcony is level 1 and the ground floor level, so it's almost like a double height. It is actually 2 stories that you're seeing at the ground level.
And is that clear of the upper windows of the building opposite? The angle. No, it might be, but you know what I mean.
I'm afraid I don't have the section to hand, but it is broadly in line with the parapet level of that building, meaning that, generally speaking, the terraces are going to be above the first floor of that residential building opposite.
And then I don't know whether colleagues might pick up on this, but I want to come back to paragraph 108 and the table that follows it in relation to the relative comparison between the previously consented scheme in 2005 and this proposal, and if you like, the net gains and losses in terms of VSC. My inference was that there was a reduction in the lower losses, but there was a slight gain in the if you're impacted to a slightly greater extent than, but overall there was a, on balance, well, if you just explain just in clarity my inference is, and confirm that my inference is correct in terms of my reading of that table.
So just to be absolutely clear, obviously we're talking here about daylight impacts now on the properties to the north of the site, which are 60 Park Street and the Bear Pit Apartments. And Councillor Rose is referring to paragraphs 108 and the table that immediately follows it. And what this table sets out is the impact on the VSE of the proposed development compared with the existing site. And then it also compares what the impact would be against the consented scheme, because obviously the consented scheme could be implemented, it could be built out, and it would have a level of impact on the VSC. And so that second line in each of these tables is just providing a comparative measure, so how much more impactful the current proposal would be over the consented scheme. And if we're talking specifically about 60 Park Street, what the table shows in the third line is that there would be one window that would have or I'll go in reverse order. So previously with the consented scheme, 5 windows would have had a substantial adverse VSC impact. As a result of the proposed scheme, 6 would. Then when you step down to 30 to 40%, which is what we refer to as a moderate adverse impact, the consented scheme would have impacted at that VSC level 1 window, whereas the proposed would impact 2 windows. And then when you step down further to 20 to 30%, the proposed would have a minor adverse impact on 3 windows, whereas the consented implemented development would have had an impact on 4. So, and then obviously beyond that, there is no kind of material VSC loss. So essentially what you're seeing is that 1 window would switch from having a 30 to 40% moderate adverse impact to having a 40%, which we consider as substantial adverse impact. And similarly, 1 window would go from having a 20 to 30%, that's minor adverse impact, to having 30 to 40% moderate adverse impact. So there would be 2 windows that would encounter a worsened impact. But as you'll see from the table, 1 less window would have a minor adverse impact. I can't really say that one offsets the other because they're independent, they're individual windows, but what the table is trying to show is the scope of change and the number of windows that would be comparatively affected worse or better than the consented and implementable scheme.
I think Councillor O'Brien, no? Or not? Yep.
Actually, Councillor Rose pretty much asked my question, but if I can perhaps add a supplemental. The windows that will be adversely affected, are there any mitigating circumstances in terms of them being dual aspect, or, you know, I mean, what material effect is that going to have on residents of those properties?
So, as explained on page 31 and page 32 deal with the impact on 60 Park Street, and the figures that you'll see in paragraph 110 talk about the VSC loss. And so you'll see that there are in total 6 substantial adverse impacts. However, if we take the case of the west dwelling, at first floor level, you've got an open plan kitchen, living, diner. So that kitchen, living, diner is served by a number of windows and has multiple aspect, and it's only one of those windows that's actually being affected, that's encountering a substantial adverse impact, so the others would not. So that could be considered a mitigating factor. Then when you look at the east dwelling, there are 2 ground floor bedrooms that would experience a VSC a substantial adverse impact in terms of VSC. However, both of those windows are bedrooms, and bedrooms are not considered to be as sensitive as other room types, such as living rooms, drawing rooms, rooms that are used during the day, as set out in the BRE guidance. In the east dwelling, there are also 3 windows at first floor level that would similarly experience a substantial adverse impact. However, the layout of the east dwelling is the same as, or similar to the layout of the west dwelling, in that upper floor is a large open plan kitchen, living, diner, has dual aspect. And so although there are 3 windows that experience that level of impact, there are other windows serving that room that wouldn't experience that level of impact, and as such that could be considered a mitigating factor as well.
Councillor Newlands,
Well, between Councillors Rose and Councillor O'Brien, you've answered. Yeah, thank you. So that was one issue that I was interested in. Can you please also though advise? So obviously in the tables that are included in the report, it seems that the most adverse impact appears to be from the proposed development is on Sumner Street, where you've actually got a loss of 62 properties which are minimally impacted, or a reduction in the number of windows that are minimally impacted by 62, as opposed to a rise of the number of windows that are impacted by 20 to 30% of 44 on page 36.
Sorry, could you just repeat that? I'm just struggling
It's the
find exactly right.
each of these, the table relating to each of these different dwellings has got 3 rows on it. Yeah, the final row of the third table, which relates to Sumner Street, shows that you've got 62 fewer windows that are minimally impacted or not at all impacted, and 44 more windows that are impacted with a 20 to 30% loss.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry, so we're looking at 1 to 30 Sumner Street and 71 to 100 Sumner
Yes.
Street, aren't we? Yes.
And I was interested if you could tell me whether Sumner Street is that private housing or is it social housing?
To the best of my knowledge, it's Peabody, isn't it?
Corporation
It's cool.
So it's housing association.
Yes.
And can you Park Street and the Bear Pit Apartments,
I believe they're private. They're all private.
They're both
owned,
private?
aren't they? Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. The other thing I wanted to ask, it actually sort of follows on from Councillor Whittam's question. You said that any adverse effects would be spotted very quickly. However, once they've been spotted, whose responsibility is it to put them right? Does any agreement with the developer ensure that it is the developer's responsibility to cover the costs and consequences of adverse impact on existing or discovered archaeological sites?
Yes, indeed. It's an obligation to. We normally incorporate an obligation to carry out these archaeological studies on the site, and that would be embedded in this. That would be embedded in this proposal, including the monitoring work during the archaeological works. So the borough archaeologist would attend the site and carry out and monitor the works while they're being carried out. There is when anything is discovered on the site, an assessment is made straight away in that respect, and then a mitigating strategy is prepared straight away to see how that will be dealt with and managed. In some instances, for example, on Harper Road, a Roman sarcophagus was found that was removed from site and recorded and now resides with the Museum of London. So. In other instances where something obviously of highest significance is found, then as the councillor, as John mentioned, as happened in Brandon House, a completely new an amendment to the design was brought forward as for permission, and the scheme was amended to take away the basement, which would have impacted and would have basically removed all that archaeology, which is against our policies. So that an amendment had to be secured on that site to take away the proposed basement, and it was built and constructed from the ground up, and is constructed there on site today.
Thank you very much. And that's it's not an area that I have very much experience with, so that's why it's good to understand that. But coming back to the crux of my point is, if there are costs, do we ensure that it is not the council that bears them?
Yes, it is. It's the developer's obligation to carry out all those works and obviously the amendment to their design would have to be factored into the cost of the development.
I'm conscious that there are.
Can I just one quick more?
Okay.
Yeah. I wanted to ask as well. The original proposal, which was apparently implemented, which had only 8 floors. Perhaps this is a reflection of my own experience in these matters, but what in this instance does implemented mean, and why hasn't it been built, and why are we actually looking at a radically different proposal 10 years 15 years down the line?
I think we talked about this briefly at the briefing, but the threshold for demonstrating implementation of planning permissions is very low, probably surprisingly low. And we've had quite a few instances in the borough where small amounts of work to lay a series of pipeworks or lay a small piece of concrete which can be demonstrated to legitimately form part of the footings of the eventual building have been sufficient to prove implementation. I don't know, John might comment a bit further, but in this case, the design goes back to the early part of this millennium, so designed in about 2000. Probably looking a bit dated now. The building has, or the site rather, has since changed hands, so the new owner is not interested in carrying forward that building, although it has to be reflected that they bought the site with the benefit of the planning permission for that, so they have to reserve it as a sort of fallback, if you like, and feel that they can do a better building which has multiple benefits, including providing more jobs and more floor space, but also a better design, which is what they brought forward. And yes, it is higher, but I think we feel quite strongly that it's a better response to the site and a better response to the area as it stands today and will in the future, rather than how it stood in 2000, which is broadly when that building was designed.
Thank you. Now, I know that there are still a number of hands up. Can I ask colleagues if you would bear with me? It would be very useful to hear from if there are objectives in the room, and also to hear from the applicant or applicant agents. The detailed question you're posing to officers could easily be posed to the applicant, and following the if there are supporters and board members in the room, following all that evidence, we can then ask officers further technical questions on the report proper, okay? Because the report upon which we are making our decisions. Is that all right? Thank you very much. First of all, is there an objector in the room? Are there objectors in the room? Oh, right. Okay. Fair enough. In that case, then, can I invite the applicant agent to come forward? Bear with me, I need to get my technology to work at this moment in time. Ah, there we are. It might work. Can I ask you please to introduce yourself? Once you've done that, I will then indicate, and you have 3 minutes to make your presentation.
Good evening, committee. My name is Nick Sharp. I'm from Montague Evans. We're the planning consultants for this project. Thank you. Essentially, we believe that your officers have given a very clear and detailed account of the proposals that you see before you, and it's been very interesting to hear the questions that the committee's brought forward. I'm not going to waste your time by simply running through things that are already in the report, but I would like to add a couple of points to some of the queries that have been raised to date, and also to let you know that we've got Ian Dixon from the Globe Theatre, and as you know, they are looking to take the space, some of the affordable workspace that's going to be provided as if the scheme goes forward. We've also got the architects here from Squire and Partners, our sustainability consultants and traffic consultants. So if there were any particular technical questions, those people are available to answer those for the committee. Just going back to the archaeological points that have been raised, there are a number of conditions on the permission, and there's a number of provisions within the Section 106 agreement that means that the development will bring forward funds, for example, to allow the interpretation of anything that were to be found on site. To reassure members, one of the risks that developers take in bringing forward development in an area of high archaeological priority is that they do have to deal with the costs and the financial fallout from anything that's found on the site. So I can assure you that the council will not be bearing the cost, and the developer will, were we to find a Roman sarcophagus or something similar on the site. I think you've been given some pretty detailed answers on the queries that have been raised about sunlight and daylight. Your officers have worked very hard on those points to make sure that we can bring forward a scheme that makes the best use of the site, whilst we very much hope minimises the impact on those who live around and about the site. It's extremely difficult to bring forward development in a very tight urban location like this without having some impact. And I think you've heard that in most instances, those impacts have been mitigated by the fact that there are other windows available where those windows are affected. I also note from the Officers' Committee report that the last, when we were talking about the Corporation of London blocks, that in a number of instances, one of the reasons why you get the number of changes there is that a lot of those levels are very low to start off with. And because this works on percentage change, you need hardly any change to make that significantly change. So overall, we are would say that we believe that this set of proposals significantly improves what's currently consented on the site. We've significantly improved the affordable workspace offer, and we very much hope you'll feel able to support the proposals. And if you have any more questions, we have the relevant people here to talk. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rose, and I'll go along. Councillor Rose.
Can I pick up my inquiry that I started with officers in regards to the corner balconies and the design and sort of purpose of that open space? The officers have given assurances that they don't anticipate a build out, and that would be a major change to the design and plan and would require further consent. I raised the issue of the condition and that extending to the corner balconies of level 2 to 8. Are you able to give further clarification in relation to the level 2 balcony, which is in closest proximity to the residential property opposite, and just expand on the purposing of that space and the likely typical uses? You've got a very broad band of potential occupancy for that space in warmer weather, but I wanted some more information from you as to actually what you envisage those corner spaces to be used for and when throughout the working week.
Certainly. So, as you know, quality of the quality of the office space that's created is becoming a more and more important factor for people in their working lives. And the London Plan and your own plan has a series of policies that actually seek to make sure that the new office spaces that you bring forward as part of the development in this borough are of a suitable quality and they're reasonably future-proofed. So, for example, you look to provide facilities for cyclists and showers and all of those kind of things. And in the same way, outdoor amenity space for office workers is becoming a more and more sort of important factor. And it's certainly something, not only because of your planning policies require it, but also because people are beginning to expect it more and more in new developments and in terms of the quality of life that they can enjoy. Are important. So the spaces we would envisage would be used when the weather's good for sitting out, maybe eating your lunch. They might be used when the occupants had an event of some sort, open the doors, what have you. But obviously your officers have picked up the fact that they are in close proximity in certain instances to residential accommodation, and there's a need to balance the requirements of those new office workers with the existing residents. And the conditions that have been framed by officers are designed to do just that. And what typically happens in a situation like that is that those conditions also get written into the tenant's lease, so that they're supposed to abide by them, not only because of the risk of planning enforcement, but because that they are likely to be in breach of their lease. So for that reason, I'd suggest that actually you should be reasonably confident that that space can be provided without significantly adversely affecting those residents.
Right. So you're saying it's a matter for the lease and the building manager to absolutely nail down the impact on amenity of those spaces. What I'm anxious about if you end up with either smokers' corners. And the impact that might have in terms of detritus and things, and also the standardisation of, say, planting, so that if it's a responsibility of the occupant or tenant of that floor or corner, that in some way the overall aesthetic of the building and the standard of what is allowed and permitted on those balconies is in some way coherent and not detrimental either to it as a place of work, or certainly, more importantly, to the amenity of the people living closest to it.
So firstly, dealing with the smoking point, generally speaking, you would not be allowed to smoke in a balcony like that. So I believe it would be part of the workplace, so I think it would be illegal, but I'm not sure about that. My experience is that would never be allowed, and it's going to be, first of all, you need to understand that a building like this is managed. And so going back to your point about the planting and the overall aesthetics, because it will be run by a management company, they will be responsible for maintaining all of the planting that's external and indeed the upkeep of the building. So I don't think in a building of this sort you'd expect the occupants of an individual floor to be looking after that side of it. It would be run by the management company. And for that reason, and actually for similar reasons, when it comes to things like smoking and stuff, they don't want people, you don't even want people smoking outside the front door these days, because it's, you know, if you're trying to have a high quality office space, you don't want people smoking. I mean, obviously they've got to smoke somewhere, and there is a large public courtyard at the rear of the building, and there's a covered area. So I imagine if people smoke, they'd probably go around there to smoke, but because it'd be dry. But I can't promise that smoking would be banned, but I think it's highly unlikely that you'd be allowed to use it as a smoker's corner.
Fine. Who's next? I'd like to ask the question. No? Oh, that's interesting. Fascinating. No? Countess Sons.
I was interested by the... I was interested by the interest that the Shakespeare Globe Trust has expressed in occupying the affordable space. Have any of the other tenants that currently exist in the current building expressed an interest in the affordable space? And if not, what negotiations have you, can you tell us a little bit about the negotiations that you've had to date in terms of supporting them and in their relocation?
Well, first of all, as I mentioned, we've got Ian Dixon here from the Globe, so if you'd like to hear from him, he's perfectly happy to come and speak. Turning to the other tenants in the building, well, first of all, members should be aware that the tenants who are currently in the building came into the building knowing that there was an extant planning permission for its redevelopment.
So can I just stop you there? So all the current tenants, have they been in there since 2005 then, or are there
I believe later.
Or are there any tenants that have been there prior to the original planning?
We bought the building in 2000.
Do you want to come? So this is Nick Howard from LaSalle, who are the
Nick Howitt, I'm from LaSalle. We represent the building owners, who are a UK pension fund, so not your typical developer, long-term investors in the borough. We bought the building 4 years ago with short-term tenancies in place at the time, 3-month rolling tenancies. We marketed the building as available for 5-year leases. And were quite open with tenants at that point that we were granting 5-year leases on the basis that within that time horizon our proposal would be to pursue a larger scale scheme on the site. Post that, and as part of this application, I've had discussions and with all of the tenants in situ and made them aware of our progress with discussions on the planning application and putting them, communicating with them on our timeline for looking at starting on site next year. We've number of the tenants have kind of either grown or shrunk, so they naturally some tenants have moved out. Some tenants are beginning to look for other space, and we're having discussions with them to see if we can support them within our portfolio within London.
So just to explain, LaSalle manage quite a large number of office buildings, and they obviously where they've got good tenants, relocating them to another LaSalle building is an excellent sort of way forward for everyone.
If I may, just to clarify, are we to assume that the Globe Theatre will take up all the affordable space?
Good evening. So my name's Ian Dixon. I'm Chief Operating Officer of Shakespeare's Globe. We've been in discussions with LaSalle and the project team for about 6 or 9 months now, something like that, probably something like that. This is we are a deeply invested organisation on Bankside and in the borough, as you can probably imagine. We have not just the Globe Theatre, but we also have our education studios, which are literally just over the road from this development as well. So it is a perfect location for us, because we have a chronic need for space to house our people so that we can do our work. a chronic need for space, and it is right over the road from where we work, and the timing of the scheme is absolutely ideal for our plans with our extant scheme, which is consented as well. We certainly, I only found out about the extended space today, so this is incredibly fast and recent news for me as well. We certainly have the need for the existing space, which has been offered already. I think we'd look at the expanded space very seriously as to whether that is of use to us or not. I can't say definitively now that it would be, but I think certainly it's something we'd be very interested in looking at and exploring for our longer term plans.
Fine. So in other words, there is no agreement at this stage. How many businesses are in the current space that might be displaced?
I think there's approximately there's 15 tenancies.
And have any of those tenants expressed a desire to be a part of the future building?
No.
Apart from the Globe.
Apart from the Globe?
Yeah.
Right. Okay, duly noted.
Have they been offered? I mean, I know there's going to be a set criteria in which to sort of occupy that space.
I think it's worth noting.
But have they actually? I'm just trying to establish whether there's been a sort of an equitable negotiation and an offer to current tenants, or whether it's a question of, you know, the Globe Trust have got in there first, and as much as we sort of appreciate and support the Globe and admire their presence in the borough, I'm just trying to sort of say if this has been sort of carry on.
Just to explain, first of all, the tenants who are in the building are all on market rents because they are market tenants. So the affordable workspace, there are a particular set of criteria that you have to hit in order to be eligible for occupation of that workspace. The Globe does hit those criteria for eligibility because they're a charitable organisation and because of the nature of the work that they do. So the reason that we've been in discussions with the Globe is not that they've got in there fast, it's actually that they fit all of the criteria that you as a council set for occupying that type of space, and they have a need, and they are deeply rooted in the borough, and we actually felt that they were an ideal tenant for that space for all of those reasons. When it comes to the existing tenants in the building, what Nick and the managing agents did was they met with all of those people and they've talked to them about what the plans are. And in general, those people are going to move somewhere else, or Nick's looking around elsewhere in their portfolio to look for space that will take them. Remember, they've all got to be decanted for quite a long period whilst we build the building. And what most businesses do is they just move on to another space. So we've worked really hard with the existing tenants in the building, and they're all fully aware, and they were all fully aware when they took the space for in the moat park.
Thank you. Thanks for that clarification. I just wanted to establish and make sure that there weren't currently any tenants that would also be eligible for the affordable space at the moment, whilst the criteria is being drawn up. In terms of current rents that they pay within the current building, when you look for alternative premises, are they likely to be equitable in terms of what they pay, or are...
Yeah. So first of all, because what happens is you pay a lower rent if you're taking space in a building that's going to be redeveloped, because what most businesses would do, moving's something that as business you don't want to do particularly frequently. So for example, if you're going to take a standard 20-year lease on a building, then you're going to pay quite a high rent, but you'll get good quality space that will be yours for that whole period. What often happens with spaces like this...
Can I just stop you there? That's why I asked from the outset whether there were any tenants that were there prior to the original planning application.
Yeah. So I don't know if there are any that are there prior, but all of them are on short leases because of the redevelopment. And when you bought the site, that was the case, wasn't it? Yeah.
Well, I'm very confident that none of the tenants were there prior to the 2005 consent. The majority, the vast majority of tenants we put in over the last 3 years.
Yeah. when those tenants move, then if they chose to move to another space that, again, had a relatively limited lifespan, they'd probably get a similar rent. If they wanted in the market to find somewhere that was longer, they might pay a little more. But what Nick will do is, and what LaSalle will do, is they'll look at whether they've got possibilities that would work for both sides. So the advantage of somebody who is a large-scale landlord being involved in a scheme like this is that they're far more able to work with the existing tenants upon redevelopment to make sure that everybody can kind of get out, get back in, move around in a way that is the least disruptive.
Thank you. And if there are further questions, I want to thank you for your presentation this evening. Thank you. Can I ask if there is a supporter in the room who lives within 100 metres of the development site? If there is a supporter? No? Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
Arguably the Globe is, although we're not residents, clearly.
Yes, I'm told that you have to be a resident.
Right.
Okay. So you cannot on this occasion, but thank you.
Thank you.
Is there a ward councillor in the room? Is there a ward councillor? No? Well, in that case, then, members, let's go back to yourselves. And you've heard the evidence. Councillor Whittam, and we'll go through the details again. Please, go ahead.
We'll go back to questions to officers, yeah?
Yes.
Okay. Michael, can you tell us the history of the existing building and why it has no merit to be kept?
Thank you, Chair. The existing building, I've looked at the historic maps and obviously, and we know this building from some time now, since I've started at Southwark. It is a former, sorry, I had it down here. Sorry, it's a warehouse building. It's an early 20th century warehouse building, but it was also an enamelling works. Typical of this location. It is a fine example of its type, but very difficult to repurpose and very difficult to reintegrate into a new and modern development. The site, the building that you actually see is made up of two buildings side by side. There's a sort of, if the picture were slightly higher, you'd see that the one floor is sort of slightly lower where you can see the division between the two former buildings. There we go. You can see that it's made up of one sort of T-shaped building and another little building to the side that have been merged together. The site does extend to the frontage on Park Street, which is of no merit. It's a 1980s building. So what you've got is a fragment in there that of part of the site, which although at the pre-application stage we did discuss and we did look at the possibility of somehow integrating it into the development, it simply wasn't possible to do it. And it's not in a conservation area, it's not protected in that respect, and it is, whilst a good example of its typology, it's not of highest significance and worthy of preserving in its own right. Certainly not for in the instance of in the context of a very high quality replacement scheme that would deliver more jobs, a higher quality environment, improvement to the context in that respect. So we did take it in the balance. It is not possible to repurpose it. It's not possible to reintegrate it into the development, which would basically just subsume it and leave it just as a facade, and then the windows wouldn't even work with the floors, with the new floors and so on. So it simply wasn't possible to integrate it fully into the development, and so it was taken. The decision was taken that it would, and the significance is not. It is a good example, but it isn't of the highest significance worthy of preserving. So it was taken. The decision was taken to not hold on to it, given the quality of the replacement building.
Thank you for that. And we may just go to paragraph 176. And if I note that, once you're there, I go into the second sentence. It's been designed to form an extension of the courtyard within the adjacent consented scheme at 133 Park Street, as the neighbouring scheme was already being consented and would deliver the majority of the courtyard. Yes. Just explain around that. Just explain that further.
Yes, just to explain further. So the image that you're seeing here on the screen on the right-hand side provides an impression of what this consolidated courtyard plaza space would be like. So just to fill you in on the planning history here, the adjoining site, which makes up the majority of the rest of the urban block, was granted planning permission. The redevelopment of that site was granted planning permission about 18 months, 24 months ago. And at the heart of that scheme was a courtyard plaza space. And at that time, the developers were cognizant of the fact that this scheme, or this plot next door, was due to come forward. And so it was always intended that the development of this site would in some way contribute, or at least kind of enclose and finish off this public courtyard plaza. And what you're seeing here is is an image from within the courtyard plaza looking towards the proposed development, and as you can see, it frames that space. It provides an arcaded area, double height arcaded area at ground floor level. It will be a hard surfaced space, but interspersed with planting, trees, and other elements of soft landscaping. And the idea of this is that it's a sort of discoverable space. That was always the intention as part of the original application, and this proposal reinforces that. It provides a new link from Park Street, or it consolidates a link from Park Street into the Courtyard Plaza, and provides this discoverable route through the site from Park Street in the north to Sumner Street in the south. And so, yeah, for clarity, that is what paragraph 1.176 is capturing, that there would also be a contribution to this Courtyard Plaza as part of the proposed development.
And if I may, look at this image, it doesn't appear to align well with the adjacent buildings. Would we agree? It doesn't seem to appear to, and I know there's an objector that noted the front facade and how distinctive this new building might be compared to the existing. And I recognise we said that in terms of its architectural merit, but I'm thinking from a consistency point of view, it doesn't appear to be consistent with the general feel of that street.
Sorry, Chair, for the sake of clarity, you're talking about the image on the left, are you, for that, in that alignment?
Yeah, that's right.
Well, it is intended to align directly with the Emerson Street frontage. The building that you see, the sort of lower building, is the listed building on the corner before the new development. And on plan, it is intended, and it is shown as on our page 7 of the packs, the alignment, the building line of that building actually is exactly aligned with the listed building across the road. If you can see, the pavement edge is shown on that on Sumner Street there. The listed building is shown across the road, and that alignment continues through. So geometrically, that's what's intended in that design.
It might be worth saying that on page 10 of your original report, and on the site plan, which you probably have on your members' pack as well, because there's a sort of slight kink in New Globe Walk, which becomes Emerson Street as it crosses Park Street, that's what makes the building look like it's coming forward. It follows the correct building alignment, but there's a slight kink in the road, which gives it that kind of presence.
Thank you. Are there further questions? Comments, members? Further comments, Councillor Rose? Any comments you want to make? You usually have a good comment or two to make. Of course, Councillor Nivens. Okay, go ahead.
Can I just ask, in this photograph on page 9, I'm kind of assuming that this the building sort of closest to us on the left so that obviously is a warehouse. Is it the same as what is being demolished to build this building?
It's slightly older, and it is in the conservation area.
So in a sense, the boundary of the conservation area doesn't include the poor old warehouse that we're knocking down, but
No,
actually it's virtually the same as this one here.
No, that looks like a sort of probably late Victorian warehouse. The one that we're looking to, that's proposed to be demolished as part of this proposal, is turn of the century. The new is post-Victorian, 20th century warehouse. So they probably are just slightly, of slightly different eras.
Very good, thank you. No? That's fine. Councillor Whittam?
Just coming back to the daylight sunlight on page, I don't know how to give you the top page or the bottom page, the table on paragraph 108. 60 Park Street has 11 windows, no loss. I don't understand the numbers there because there's only 8 windows on the front of the building. So are the 6 that are fully adversely affected the ones that are drawn in shadow?
So the reason why you're seeing a figure of 11 and thinking, well, I can't see 11 windows in the front of that elevation is because there are also windows on both side elevations. That's why the total number of windows is greater. And in terms of the windows on 60 Park Street, which would be affected, you are looking at, yes, precisely those windows that are in shadow on this image. Yeah. Sorry, in terms of adverse, substantial impact, yes.
That's fine. I think we may have exhausted matters now, and I'll now sort of move forward. Would any member of the committee like to speak further on the matter? Are there any amendments to the conditions arising from the addendum report, or no? In that case, that's fine. Councillor Newens. Yeah.
Thank you. Can I ask, so, yeah, I suppose it's a rhetorical question. So if we were minded not to approve this application, the developer could simply go away and build the other one. So actually, we're really looking at the relative merits of those 2 buildings rather than the merits of not knocking down a warehouse that is pretty similar to the one that's being preserved.
They would have the right to carry on and build out the previous consent, or they may obviously choose to come forward with something else. But I think the difficulties of incorporating any substantial part of that retained building would remain a problem in any other scheme. And clearly, the consent that has been granted and implemented didn't retain any part of that building, as you know.
Righto then, thank you for your response. If I may move forward, I'll move forward then. I'd like to move. Councillor Whittam. Okay, please, very quick one, yeah.
We haven't asked Alex anything. And one of the objectors said it would cause a lot of congestion in the area if this was built out. Would you agree with that, or do you think it won't make much difference?
No, we would not agree with that because the start of implementation of this development coincide with the finishing of one of the adjoining sites anyway, where when they start the development, there's minimal vehicle movements. It's around 5 for the setup and the demolition per day. So the finishing of the adjoining development is around 3 per day. So overall, that's 8. And the only critical period where this development is being implemented, where we have like 20 vehicles per day, again, coincide with the finishing of the third development, where they're doing the fit out and then the finalization of the development. So really, you're looking at the 20 per day for this development during implementation plus another 3 relating to the finishing of the last development. So we don't consider that overall that it will create problem at all.
Thank you. Now you've been asked a question. Now, I'm now moving forward. I'm now going to put forward the motion. I'd like to move that we adopt the office recommendations set out in paragraphs 1 to 2 of the report and pages 8 of your agenda pack. That one, that the full planning permission be granted for application A19A0240, subject to referral to the Mayor of London and to conditions and the applicant entering into satisfactory legal agreement. 2, that in the event of the legal agreement not having been entered into by the 14th of May 2020, that the Director of Planning be authorised to refuse the planning permission for application AP0240, if appropriate for the reasons set out in paragraph 231 of the report. Does anyone wish to second my motion? Seconded by...
You just want to refer to.
Oh, yes, indeed. I should also refer to the minor amendments to the conditions, and that's, of course, set out in the addendum report. So we incorporate those amendments as part of our motion. Okay. Duly seconded. Councillor Whittam, can I move to the vote to approve the motion?
All for, Chair.
Thank you very much. The motion is passed. Thank you all, and good evening.